All right, now let's look into the history of cannabis and its origins and how long it's been on the planet. I've done a few that contain small information about this, but here's one that shows tracing back to its earliest times. Research traces cannabis plant origins to the Tibetan plateau 28 million years ago. A fascinating new study published in the Journal of Vegetation and History and Archaeobotany on May 14th details the work of a team of researchers from the University of Vermont who presented their evidence that the cannabis plant evolved 28 million years ago at a specific area in the Tibetan plateau. Now, this is done by paleobotanists. Titled Cannabis in Asia, its center of origin and early cultivation, based on a synthesis of subfossil pollens and archaeobotanical studies, the study aimed at establishing the oldest common ancestors of the cannabis plant. Led by John McPortland from the University of Vermont and a team of investigators, and analyzed wild plant type distribution data, including 155 fossil pollen studies. Striving to determine the unknown origins of the modern cannabis plant, they revealed that it thrived in arid steppe-like conditions caused by the tectonic formation of the northeastern Tibetan plateaus, and thrived out from there in general vicinity of the Qinghai Lake around 28 million years ago. This co-localizes with the first steppe community that evolved in Asia, said the team, and while cannabis pollen is visually similar to hop pollen, like for beers, the researchers managed to distinguish the two species and establish that the hops and cannabis had actually shared a common ancestor in old times. And so, I guess it goes together, skunky beer and skunky weed. The hops and, pot and hops, huh? So here's a look at top of a pot plant, and then here's hops and how they grow. And of course, it's a quite different thing. The leaf structure is what happens on here, and the flowerette is built out of thousands of leaves and little stuff sticking out between them, and this has clusters and berry type forms, but in way ancient times somewhat similar. It makes you wonder how that goes together. Where did the cannabis plant take root at? Well, humans have utilized cannabis plants for at least 27,000 years, and this new study provides a richer understanding of not only when the first cannabis plants evolved, but also about when humanoids first began to use them as medicines within ritual environments. I've shown you a few videos. One of them got blocked in 244 countries, so I don't know who got to see it around the world other than a few of us. But it was an ancient India burial ground of Aryans with horses and everything, and they talk about soma and the natural drink that was from there that they had made out of ephedra, opium, and or poppy, and cannabis, and that they had found rope and the things for the horses and all that stuff was made out of it, and a bunch of other stuff. But it gets blocked. I shouldn't have done it, putting that A word in there. Bad word. Bad word now, especially with what happened in World War II. Of course, it goes back to this time we're talking about here, so it really had nothing to do with that. But then again, it did, because he found out how that all connected together and said, well, no, it goes back farther than that book. But regardless of that, we're not going to go into that today. But this, at least 27,000 years, might coincide with this rope that was found up in Europe, and that was made out of hemp. And that strangely correlates with something that's found on a Sumerian tablet. And it's just one of those little part things that you're like, what's that mean? And you don't know. But there's this thing, and they make reed boats, and they make reed houses and all this type of stuff. And they talk about how strong reeds are, right? But then there's this other plant, which is very much like a reed, but it is different in some fashion, distinctly described. And then it says that 3 of them is stronger than 2 men. And there's this thing that looks like you might think that they're braided together. And what's weird is the little 2-knot braided together thing kind of looks like the lightning symbol, where you see the ball thing in the middle of it, and then 3 prongs out on this side and 3 prongs out on that side, or 4, and so on like that. And apparently people were supposed to tug on this thing, so it was a strength thing, and it looks like rope. And so, I shelved that off to the side, but somehow that just kicks out of my memory as I was reading this article, and I wanted to throw it in there at some time. It came to my mind now. Usually I forget. I'm about 3/4 through. I know that there's something and I forget it. I know that I know it, and then whenever I get through with the video, I sit there, or if I read back through, I'll go, oh, and I'll forget something that was extremely important I thought I should throw in. Regardless of that, guys, but it was been used in medicines and ritual environments and stuff, and through a long series of time here, it seems. And of course there's that old stoned ape theory type thing, and I'm not down with the stoned ape type theory really, but I'm down with a getting high hominid theory, and I'm totally okay with a human or a homo having dealt with this type of stuff. All of the species are there, and they're going to talk about Denisovans and things, and Neanderthals go along with that quite well. Well, let's continue here. A Live Science article said that while this medicinal and psychotropic plant was long thought to have first evolved in Central Asia, scientists were hazy on the exact precise location. And of course, we talk about the Hindu Kush mountains and things, so it had spread through that area. And it looks like that some of the great good weeds coming out of there. You always hear about Hindu Kush and stuff when people talk about it, and it's because they had been cultivating it for a long, long time. And you talk about people that don't know what they're doing, and they make this homegrown stuff. So, it's quite an aromatic plant, just like the beer hops are quite an aromatic plant. And so it has that type of quality to it too. And some of them, whenever they burn, they smell pretty good. And then that homegrown stuff smells like burnt hay, I guess you'd say. It did not so much. Kind of like when people are smoking a pipe, though. Granddad with his old Borkum riff, whatever kind of pipe tobacco that was in there and stuff. And it has a distinct, definite smell. To me, smelled better kind of than cigars or cigarettes, of course. But let's continue. The Cannibis origin site, which is central to this new paper, is situated only a few hundred kilometers from Bayeshiva Karst Cave, which researchers recently announced in a New Scientist article that I did a vid on, that was once inhabited by an ancient relative of Homo sapiens, the Denisovans. And it also has Neanderthals in there too. It kind of overlaps each other. It's kind of weird. They have this little gap between them, and here's one, there's another one. DNA testing showed that a jawbone found that this Tibetan cave came from a Denisovan, and showed that the species was more widespread than had been previously known, and the oldest traces of cannabis have been found in or around that same area. Funny how they didn't have that in the scientific article that I had, but if you're not dealing with paleobotany people and these people, you don't really get it. That's the thing I've been trying to say for years, and it's what's helped me out so much, is that I tried to study a multifaceted form of it. And you look at elder religions and people around the Mediterranean, you get that kind of concept. And then I studied folklore and all these other things, and it gets you more well-rounded. And something like this all of a sudden well-rounds the situation a little more. You're like, well, if it's over here and it's over there, then some kind of, again, I use the phrase Johnny Appleseed situation must have happened. And there's a few articles here that are quite interesting on it. I might actually do a little series on this, origins of pot or whatever. But so here's a bunch of seeds, and hey, is that what was in those handbags? Modern flowers with ancient origins. From the Tibetan plateau, according to another Live Science article, cannabis reached Europe approximately 6 million years ago. So we're talking about Australopithecines type time or whatever. So this had happened somewhat naturally anyhow, I'm guessing, unless you want to go with the stoned ape, Johnny Apple ape theory. I don't go with that so much. But it had spread as far afield as eastern China by 1.2 million years ago. And so it seems to have run towards Europe much, much faster than it even took from the steppes where it was, and just took a right into China, right? And so over the millennium, cannabis has migrated all over the world, and through Africa it reached South America in the 19th century, penetrating the United States beginning in the 20th century, with Mexican immigrants fleeing the Mexican Revolution of 1910 to 1911. So it brought to the Americas and the New World and stuff, and because they had it in religions and things. Let me add in here now, there have been a few of the ancient smoke things that you see the priests, I forget the exact word now, the incense burner that you see, and they carry them around off into the ancient churches and stuff like that. And so they check the stuff that's in there, and it's got all this frankincense and all this stuff, but yeah, there's also cannabis in that. Dude, what? Oh, it helps to just burn or whatever, but they go around doing it, around the crowds and everything. Not that you really get a contact high. I mean, you'd have to, really ingest some and stuff. I mean, would it give you anything? Man, no. I don't know. Maybe it just takes away from the smell of all the people that are there, because it seems to be a fragrance. That really is what the incense seemed to have been for in those older times and stuff. And it's also why there was a lot of ritual cleansing before going into the churches. But I digress. After 28 million years of growth and almost 30,000 years of eventual use by humans, both cannabis sativa and cannabis sativa L were outlawed in Utah in 1915. And in 1931, it was illegal in 29 states. By 1937, they had developed the Marijuana Tax Act and put cannabis under the regulation of the Drug Enforcement Agency, which had been recently founded, criminalizing possession of the plant throughout the country unless you paid this tax on it. And then if you look into the history of it, then eventually they made that into something else. And I remember being a kid and living near Omaha, Nebraska. My dad was in the service, running all over the place, and he told me that the old rural roads all through Nebraska and into Kansas were all seeded with pot seeds before World War One or World War Two. World War One, to help them to make rope and do things like this, and so they had thrown it all across and through there, and so it was just growing wild there, and everything. But whatever. So, however, in the beginning of this century has been the law. You've seen the laws collapse under the pressure of the American people, and as of 2018, Business Insider report states marijuana legalization is sweeping across the states. It looks like while the richest and most modern technology-equipped country in the world brings in our future, there remains a hardcore population that prefer the old ways, the Denisovan way, which in the magic plant was a dietary and social staple. And I guess they have gone to the point of realizing that this Denisovans used to have it a whole lot. But Neanderthals overlapped that time too, and into Cro-Magnons and so on, and it continued through the whole time. So when you say the old ways, that's also the old Homo sapiens way through, and Homo sapiens sapiens way to have medicinal plants. And it's only nowadays that people have said, oh, that's a little too strong, and oh, well, this doesn't do anything. Sure, you can have that. And it's amazing how they've regulated and turned it into an industry of that, and also of crime. And it's why they've decriminalized weed pretty much in a lot of places. They realized, hey, that's not the problem. That's not the problem. Well, it's a gateway drug. No, it's not. The problem is the gateway drug. The pot's no different than beer. If you'd said the same thing, then you would have to say that alcohol and such is the same one. And we've gone through the same idea of prohibitions and things like that. So yeah, traced to ancient Tibet. And so there's a couple of other articles here, and like I said, I might do a couple on that and make this little series out of it for y'all. But like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. More to come. Peace.